Hello, good morning. This is my take from the digital stories and the digital story articles that I read. Um, I think it's best if I dove into more of the digital stories and use some of what I read to analyze some of it. So to start off, we have three stories. The first story I had was Mommy. Just really fast. It was about this black woman taking care of her elderly mother who was suffering from dementia, and they were talking about her past and her history and things that she had gone through and having grown up in the church and things of that nature. The second story was about a black woman telling the story of how her black grandma was one of the first kids integrated into the Arizona school and how the FBI had to come in and take care of it and things of that nature. The final story was Black Woman Magic, which was about, just a black woman's take on being African American and the kind of quote unquote black magic that is associated with that. Um, the For me, each story was different when you interpret it, but I think the overall theme, at least of the three stories I watched, was of how being black influenced these stories and their perspectives drastically changed it. Even the first one, we talk about how um, she is a black woman, but her mother was black, her grandmother was black, her great grandmother was black, and how each story, like her story started way before her story, and her mother and her story started way before. And I think that was a perspective that we have to acknowledge because she's talking about the idea that stories can exist beyond ourselves. Um, and in the second story, I think the idea of the story having power is prevalent, which is coming from one of the reflection articles that talks about there's power for stories and there's power in stories. I think the power in this story is more about the idea of overcoming adversity, even from a young age, and learning how to use that later on in life, as we talked about, or as she talked about, how her mother had to later raise three black kids, and go on to teach them to fight against injustice. And lastly, we talk about black magic, and I think she did a very creative thing in the early on, kind of talking like, it gave me a lot of like kind of New Orleans voodoo vibes. I thought that was an interesting way to tell a story, but you could only do something like that through digital storytelling. You couldn't really do something like that in written storytelling. And I thought she really capitalized on the fact that this was digital storytelling, which kind of segues into my next point, the idea that each of these stories truly utilized their digital storytelling ways. When we talked about the 7 steps from before, the step that pops out to me the most is owning your insight and how your perspective needs to really shine through, especially to me in the first one. Her insight being, the story that she's telling didn't start with her, that it started before her, and that was an insight she had to own and really come through with in the story. For the second one, really, I felt like the first one, finding the moment was more important. She found the moment being, when her mother was going to school for the first time and she, all these things happened to her. And the last one to me was owning your emotions. She talked about, how when her dad was beating her, how she felt and how angry she was at her brother, and emotion was prevalent through that story. Um, each one of them, used the digital storytelling ways for their own benefit. I think the visual aids really helped illustrated, especially to me the second one, with the pictures of the National Guard standing there with the huge rifles, and then like, these are just kids, like really seeing that, like seeing it helps really illustrate and nail home the ideas of what was going on within the story. And so that is all I have for you today. So thank you very much. Have a good one.